Imagine if Wizard of Oz didn't have those traumatizing flying monkeys and the evil witch. If Willy Wonka didn't have a manic episode in that boat with those kids on the chocolate river. Our best stories that we grew up with filled us with wonder and imagination, but also showed us that the world is scary and unsafe. It's important to remember that the magic hasn't died, but we have to fight for it. This is Pan's Labyrinth.
All right.
Hell yeah.
Nice.
Who are you?
What are you guys doing here?
Holy shit. All right. So today we have, I'm going to introduce the podcast. I'm Altaf.
And I'm Chris.
And this is Movies That's Changed Us. And today we're going to explore how Pan's Labyrinth changed our guests from the channel TBR Schmitt, Daniel and Samantha.
Hi.
Look at you guys clapping for yourselves.
As you should. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, I mean, Chris and I have been watching you for a while for the same reason that Chris and I value reactions that are raw, feel genuine, and feel like there's a love for movies there. And you guys are definitely one of those. So
Thank you.
It just means a lot that you're on the show. Yeah.
And you guys have helped us with some tech in the past too.
Very important to point out. There was like a huge problem I was having, and then Samantha was just on the Discord helping me out with that.
Yeah, we encountered it too, so we all got to share what we learned.
Us reactors got to stick together, you know?
Right, yeah.
So I'm gonna start here. Can you guys talk a little bit about why you picked Pan's Labyrinth? Because we asked you guys to pick the movie. And
Yeah.
we gave some rules that basically said there were no rules. You pick any movie. We don't have to have seen it even. And Chris and I, Chris had seen half of this movie and never completed it, which is pretty on brand for him.
In two separate sit downs too.
And two separate sit downs. He was so bored and thought the movie was so dull. He was like,
fuck off. That's not true.
Yeah. He was just like, right when the faun shows up, he's like, I'm out.
I hate this movie.
Yeah.
The faun, I'm like, you lost me there.
And for me, I had never seen it. And so when you guys said Pan's Labyrinth, we're like, okay, it gives us a great excuse. So talk about that. Why'd you pick this movie?
Would you like to start, or you want me to start?
I can go. This was one of the first movies that you ever showed me. We weren't dating or anything yet. We were just getting to know each other. And I just remember being really kind of surprised that this was the movie that you wanted to show all of our friends. And as we're watching it and stuff and listening to you talk about it and how passionate and enthusiastic you were about it, it made such an impact on kind of my early thoughts on you.
Me, right. Yeah. So yeah, without even knowing, I, picked a movie that impressed her.
Yeah.
Even when I was trying to impress her for a long time.
Hell yeah. I mean, it's often like a boyfriend rite of passage of sorts when you show the girl you're interested in movies you like.
Yeah,
For
exactly.
sure.
And it was huge for me too, because it's not like it was a situation where I just it was like a movie night with a bunch of our friends.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like I, picked this movie and it started playing and I turned to look at her and she was just chatting with the girls on her phone or something like that. She was very much watching the movie. So I think this experience that we shared, it kind of kickstarted, this, I guess, interest in each other that obviously over time, blossomed into us being married and having a kid and stuff. So
yeah, that's awesome.
A lot can happen with a movie.
It is always the worst feeling when you're showing someone, especially someone that you like, a movie, and they're kind of just treating it oh, this is a background thing, and you're like,
Yeah.
no, you don't understand, this is a part of my identity.
I'm showing my girlfriend the Star Wars prequels right now. Wait, you guys have seen Star Wars, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Just making sure we're comfortable with spoilies here, But we're treating it almost like a date night thing where we watch it in 20, 30-minute increments, pausing it all the time and analyzing it together.
Well, but I want to say something though, because this is now you're 5 years in. Talk about for you that first thing that you showed her.
Okay.
Because I feel like that's a better comparison.
Oh, okay. Damn.
Because now you're 5 years in. You guys are watching prequels whenever you have time.
Well, yeah. I guess really what I'm trying to get at is more of that sort of thing never goes away for couples sometimes.
What was the first big thing for you
Yeah,
guys?
that's a good question. I mean, I know this is probably like a year into our relationship, but the MCU movies are a big pet project we did over COVID. You know, I was already caught
Nice.
up on them, but she hadn't seen like any of them, so I was walking her
Wow.
through each movie. So like every time I saw her, do you want to watch Ant-Man? Do you want to watch this? Like,
This guy really loves comic book movies.
yeah, but I think early on, oh, you know what? It might have been we went to a like an outdoor screening of The Graduate. That was a big one, which was
Wow,
really cool.
we haven't seen that.
Mm-mm.
Oh, you guys should watch The Graduate. That's a amazing movie. I mean, you know,
I feel like the thing that you're missing out on is the like Breaking Bad.
that's yeah, that's true.
I feel like I remember. I was
you
like,
remember my love life better than I do.
Well, Breaking Bad is such a formative show for Chris, and I mean for me as well. But like, I feel like for you, you have the tattoo, like you have
Yeah,
the pink
yeah,
teddy
yeah.
bear tattoo on your arm, and I remember him telling me like when he started dating his girlfriend, he was like, yeah, I'm showing. She hadn't seen Breaking Bad, so I'm showing her Breaking Bad. It's really exciting. Like,
Yeah, that was like one of our first dates that we did. I remember that.
yeah,
Yeah.
so-
Okay. Well, thank you for that.
of course. How
Keep
I
you around
love
for.
this.
How are this is a question for Daniel and Chris. How are you two when you're showing something to someone? Like, because I'm kind of like, I get super anxious when I'm showing like one of my favorite movies to someone, because I'm like, okay, I hope they're paying attention. I hope they're liking it.
Yeah.
Did they catch that part? Did they catch the part that I like? How are you guys with that?
I'm the same way. Like sometimes I'll show Sam, even if it's just like a funny video or something, and like if we're like 5 seconds in, and I'm like, "Ooh, she doesn't think this is as funny as I thought." Like I get hot. I start like I can feel my body temperature rising and stuff. I'm like, this was a mistake. So it's the same thing with like when when I'm showing like a movie that I really like I'm paying attention to the other person, very much like a reaction channel. Like I'm kind of watching them more than I'm watching the actual movie. And it does suck, and sometimes it is hurtful if like you're showing some like a movie to someone, and like you said, if they treat it like something in the background, or like it's not something that's like special and stuff. It's like, oh dang, like I thought this would really hit.
Yeah, I think, you know, for me, I think both me and my girlfriend right now are pretty quiet and like take things in. I think you know that about me, Altaf, that at least when I know we're both reactors, it's funny. We, you know, on camera, it's sometimes it's different than how we are with, you know, outside of,
Yeah.
you know, externalizing your opinions. But I'm usually one that kind of just watches and wants to kind of just absorb it. And my girlfriend can be the same way. So both of us can kind of be quiet. But there is always a part of me that wants the gratification, you know, of like, wow, that was an amazing scene. Thanks for showing that to me. Like we all want that. You know?
Right, yeah.
It's not realistic. Okay, so Samantha, I want you to take us back to that first time watching Pan's Labyrinth. What stuck out to you immediately about the movie?
I mean, honestly, the fact that it was a foreign film,
Oh yeah.
I was like, oh, like that's interesting. That was an interesting choice for
Right.
like the group setting of all of us sitting in his garage room that had it was like a hangout spot that
I
we
mean,
all had.
it's definitely a confident move to be like, all right, all our friends are hanging out. This movie's in full Spanish. Like,
yeah.
Right,
You have to pay attention, really, or you're not gonna know what's going on.
Yeah, it's not like I threw on like "Dude, Where's My Car" and like we're having beers and watching or something like that. Like, it's not like the most like nerdy film movie, but it's like relatively niche.
Yeah.
And so it's like I would say that was a pretty aggressive move to throw in a subtitled foreign Spanish dark fairy tale movie.
Yeah, and that's what I was gonna say too. The fact that it was a fairy tale,
yeah, yeah.
all of it kind of put together. I was like, wow, like this is a selection.
Yeah.
And we're all paying attention. Like I think that the one advantage of that move is that if you really want to show someone a movie that you like, and if it's a foreign movie, that means it's gonna force them to pay attention. 'Cause
Yeah,
it's just
yeah,
like,
very
you
true,
can't
yeah.
look away. You gotta make sure you're reading the subtitles. Well, I mean, to that point, Samantha, this is a funny story. So I feel like I was the complete newbie from this whole group talking about this movie. Like you had obviously seen it halfway twice. I went into this movie completely fresh. I didn't know it was going to be in full Spanish.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So 2 nights ago, I turn it on. I'm like, oh, okay. And it's not like I had like this aversion to it. It was just like kind of a surprise.
It might have even been the opposite. It might have actually pulled you in, you know?
Yeah, and I mean, like, obviously, like, Guillermo Del Toro, I know him, even though I know he's like he's a Spanish filmmaker. Like, even I know him as a guy who's made Hellboy and Blade 2
Yeah.
and Shape of Water, like American movies, you know? And so there was something also cool about that. It was just like, oh, this guy, like, his one of his biggest movies is a full Spanish language movie, and it has all his trademark. He got to do it. Like, that's fucking awesome.
Yeah, yeah.
Did you like it right away? Did it take some warming up? Like, talk about that. Like, what was it? Well, because for me, like, my experience with it, it took a second for me to get into this movie's wavelength, because I'm like, okay,
Yes.
I had no idea what was going to happen. The only image I had seen of this movie was the pale man, the hands and eyes.
Okay, yeah.
And I just seen that because I was scrolling through Netflix one day and I saw that image. I'm like, that looks cool.
Yeah, it definitely took some time to like kind of warm up to it, but I think that also goes back to knowing that this was one of his favorite movies, that I was like, this is something he's passionate about, like, let me give it a real chance here and kind of take it all in. But I obviously also didn't really know what to expect with the film. So a lot of the imagery, some of the violence, and it being a subtitled film, all of that put together is like not something that I would select on my own to watch. So
Fair
it
enough.
took a little bit of warming up. But especially now, we rewatched it in preparation for the podcast. I feel like it hit just so much different, also being a parent now.
Yeah, yeah, I can imagine so, you know. I mean, you know, Alta, did you want to get into that, or was there anything else you wanted to get into?
Yeah, I think, like, let's start talking about the movie and its themes and everything, because I texted Chris right after the movie was over. Like, we watched it separately, but I texted him after I finished, and I was like, dude, what the fuck? This is so sad.
Yeah, that's all it said. And I was like, I haven't finished watching it yet. Don't
And I'm like, shit, I'm sorry. But yeah, no, I think I really responded to what I said in the synopsis a little bit, of just, it is kind of amazing that this movie tackles the violence head on, its dark elements very head on, but I would still feel confident in showing like my kid this in the, like, if I have a kid in the future, I wouldn't feel scared of it, because it still has all those nice fairy tale elements. And I think something that people don't talk about great fairy tales is that they have very dark elements to mostly all of them.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
like I mentioned about Wizard of Oz, like, I watch Wizard of Oz now, and I see like those flying monkeys, and that moment, though, that sequence of the witch laughing in the hourglass, when Dorothy thinks she's gonna die, and those flying monkeys, you think like, oh my god,
this is bad. You know.
Right.
But
I mean,
yeah,
even Snow White has that too, actually. Like in the very beginning. You haven't seen Snow White, have you?
no.
Spoily alert for Snow White, but right in the opening, that, you know, the evil queen was having hunters like cut out her heart and put it in this box. Like, it's pretty grim in the OG Disney days.
Well, okay, so let's start here. This movie really reminds me, at least the beginning of it really reminded me a lot of like kind of Amblin Entertainment, the Spielberg-ness of it all, you know, like a kid stuck in a situation, she has no agency, right? And so she's able to escape into this world of fantasy very literally. But she does that through exploring, she's curious. What were you guys like as kids? Were you guys curious kids? Were you guys like were you the kids that would go explore in the woods? Like, what was that like for you?
Yeah, I think for me, I was definitely much more use my kind of imagination to have fun and stuff. Like, you know, as like kids, me and my friends would like go into our big backyard, and we would have like this hill, and we would like fight like imaginary, you know, monsters or soldiers or something like that. Or if I'm in my room, I'm, you know, building a spaceship or something and crafting kind of like a story with that. So it's like, I think I can relate with that, not the trauma and traumatic war events, but relating to like using imagination as a kid. And I think when I became old enough and video games kind of became popular, that was like all I did. And I loved just like the different stories and single player and all that stuff. And so I think imagination was definitely big on me.
I wouldn't say that I was like an adventure. I played outside a lot. I know that's like very different for kids now. I feel like with all the technology. But I'm an only child, so imagination was like huge for me.
Same.
Yeah, so if I didn't have somebody to like play with or anything, it was using anything and everything around me to make up people or make up things. And I remember with my friends, like we had a swimming pool, so we would, play mermaids and things like that, like
Aw.
as a kid. So imagination was a big part of my childhood.
And I think as like I've gotten older, and especially like us having a kid now and stuff, I can see like whatever you see kids like playing with a pile of leaves. And it's like, I guarantee you they could have hours of fun playing with those leaves. Whereas like adults, like now with the different perspective, you look at like a pile of leaves and you're like, oh, I gotta rake some leaves this afternoon.
Yeah.
It's just like you don't
When
see.
did that change?
Yeah, what does that change?
Yeah.
You lose that joy and that wonder, and I think that comes up a lot. I don't want to jump around too much, but I think that comes up a lot in the movie and stuff where like the adults they don't see that kind of imagination world, and all they see is the bleak darkness and stuff. And I think as, adults you become more and more pessimistic. And so having a kid now, it's like I would really want to try to prioritize trying to find the joy and imagination in just like very mundane random things.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's like, you know, I totally hear what you're saying, because I think recently I've been trying to be more deliberate in terms of like enjoying things. Like my girlfriend and I just bought like Woobles. Have you heard of those? They're like little
No, what are
crochet
those?
kits where they literally you can pick them out and you order, and you can basically they give you all the materials needed to crochet like an animal, and they have like beginner,
wow.
intermediate, and expert kind of stuff. And we just got them, and I'm going to be crocheting a pig, like a little pink pig, and she's going to crochet a coffee mug. And we both pulled up the tutorial videos, and they're just crocheting. You get the thing, and you have to wrap it around your fingers and do the. And we were watching, and I was like, "Oh, I'm going to come back to this later. This is a lot."
Yeah, this is a lot of work.
But like as an adult though, yeah, you do those pieces of your innocence kind of get gradually shed as time passes. So it is interesting. You have to kind of choose like, okay, I have to try to have fun here.
Right, yeah.
I think that's a good point because, like, I think that's kind of at least my main takeaway from this movie is that scene where the mom is freaking out over Ophelia when they find that plant underneath the bed.
Yeah.
And when the mom's like, there's no magic in this world. Like, she's really like laying it on her and throws it in the fire. And that's kind of what destroys the mom. And it's like, I think Guillermo Del Toro throughout it all, most of his filmography, if you can see that through line in so many of his movies of just like, don't let the magic die, but also like, how can you keep it alive during such a difficult time in our world?
Yeah.
And like, this is obviously a period piece set post Civil War, but also you can take it to this time too. I mean, I'm sure you guys have probably thought about this, is that, well, I mean, we live in really dark times and like the political climate, yada, yada, yada. And how can we like, does laughing or does like exploring or does trying to find the like escaping in a fantasy, is that even a good thing anymore? Should we like be grounded in reality because is escaping a bad thing? And I feel like that's kind of what this movie's reckoning with, is that no, it is important to like try to keep that alive because that's what keeps us alive in general. But I think the difference now is as you get older, you just have to like fight for it a little bit more. As a kid, it comes naturally. Like you said, Daniel, is that like, as a kid, you could look at a pile of leaves and that's your whole world. As an adult, you have to kind of fight for those moments. You have to be like, I'm gonna order a crochet kit online. I have
Yeah.
it's not gonna be fun, but I'm gonna fucking do it.
I'm gonna make this pig and I'm gonna put it on my shelf.
I'm gonna be happy.
And that's kind of what I responded to a lot. Now, I like me as a kid, like there was a period of time as a kid when I lived in Maine, so I had this like huge backyard and I had the woods. So I did have that phase of my life where I would go. I don't personally, I think Chris wrote in the notes, is like, do you like getting dirty? I don't personally like getting dirty, but I did, I did go out and like go out in the woods, and I did play outside a lot. The series that I grew up with as a kid was Harry Potter, and like the ultimate fantasy of being able to escape into this other world that's part of your world. Like
Right.
that, those are the things that I always love, is like, so this world exists, but there's a hidden part of that world that already exists that you don't even know about. But if you draw some chalk on a wall, you could go in.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah.
Yeah.
That's the stuff that's like evergreen to me. That's always going to be fun.
Yeah.
It's why I loved reading Percy Jackson as a kid. You know what I mean?
Sure, it's like ultimate kid wish fulfillment, you know?
Exactly. But that this movie's able to do that while also setting it post Civil War in this fascist regime, and it's like it's able to have very adult themes.
Yeah.
Is it, like, you guys are watching this now? Is this the first time you guys are watching this since you guys became parents?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah. What was that
Oh, no.
experience like now watching it?
Um,
Super broad question, I know, but
I know, where do you start?
for me, I think it's almost like that kind of like mama bear instinct came out for Ophelia. Watching the captain and the way even just their first interaction, where he won't shake her hand, little things like that. I'm like, I just want to like hug her and protect her from all of these things that are going on in the outside world. And for bringing that into my own life with our daughter, like I just want to make sure that I can keep her innocence for as long as possible. And obviously Ophelia is dealing with so much trauma of just the world around her, plus like the people around her. And for me, I want to protect my daughter and just make sure that she doesn't ever have to deal with that, which obviously you can only do so much. Things in the outside world are gonna hurt her, but just making sure that I'm doing everything I can in my power, I think, to make sure she doesn't get hurt.
Right. Yeah. No, looking at this movie again after becoming a parent, it's definitely you have that protective aspect of it. And then for me, it's definitely kind of like I don't want to be like the reason that she loses that like creativity or that imagination. Like I don't want to squash anything. Eventually, at some point, she's going to not want to play with some imaginary thing. But I don't want to be the person that I'm like, no, that's not real. We gotta, go to the supermarket or something, like whatever. Like I just don't want to be that. And I don't think there's necessarily, I mean, the captain, sure. The mom, obviously, like you said, when she throws the root or whatever into the fire. Mercedes, for a moment there, she kind of talks about how like, oh, when I was a kid, I used to like believe in fairy tales and stuff like that, but as an adult, like now I don't. So it's like I hope I can be a character in my daughter's life where it's like I just extend that joy for life as long as possible until something inevitably, breaks that reality for her.
Yeah.
The mom is, to your point, Samantha, the mom is trying to protect Ophelia.
Yeah, the mom's just trying to survive, essentially.
I like how that's not fully explained to the audience either. We understand the situation without there being this exposition scene of how like they met.
Yeah.
Even though there's that dinner scene where like the mom interjects and explains how the captain and her met, and the captain gets like really mad. But it's like the audience is able to like put together the pieces, and you understand very well of why this mom agreed to the situation.
Yeah, yeah,
and
she's just trying to get her daughter to cooperate with it, just to kind of get them through this. Like this isn't easy, but she's just doing the best she can to kind of keep her kids safe.
Right.
And it's just sadly a world that has no room for the imagination that Ophelia is exploring, essentially.
I want to let's start getting into the nitty gritty of this movie, because there's some like obviously amazing fantasy elements, amazing filmmaking at play here. Daniel, I want to know a little bit about you and your experience when it comes to this movie and like being sort of an inspiration. Like watching this movie, because I feel like this movie is such a great like achievement when it comes to everything I feel like we all love about movies.
Yeah.
Like you see beautiful set design, like great, brilliant creature design, amazing music. All the pieces have come together from like one vision too. So can you talk a little bit about like how this movie played a role in who you are now?
Yeah. So I think like with Sam, it was definitely kind of the connection between us, and that was huge for me also to kind of see her take the movie in such a positive way many years ago. But I had seen the movie prior to sharing it with her and our friends and stuff. And at that point, I was, a young teenager.
How many years has it been for you two, if you don't mind me asking, since you guys like first met?
Well, so we've known each other since the 8th grade. but
Wow.
we actually started dating in 2011.
Yeah, 13 years.
Hell yeah, congrats guys.
Yeah, that's awesome.
All right.
So I had seen it before sharing it with all of them, which is obviously why I wanted to share it. But I was young and not 100% sure in what I kind of wanted to do, and I really loved movies. But in school, I was just math and science just came very easy for me. Like I never had to do my homework. I never needed to study. I could just not do my homework and get an A on a test and then get a B in the class because I didn't do my homework. So
Yeah,
I just was like, I was like, okay, I guess I'll just become an engineer because that's the easiest path in school for me. So I was always kind of set on this engineering path. And plus with like me trying to be creative and I was building, buildings or spaceships or something, I always had like older people in my life, like parents or uncles or siblings, whatever, being like, oh, you should be an engineer and stuff because you can build things. So I was like, okay. And then I saw,
Okay, so casual.
so I saw this movie and kind of like you said, for me, this is just like a spectacular achievement.
How
in
old were
everything.
you, by the way, when you first saw it?
Shoot, when did this? I think this came out in 2004.
Six.
I think 2006. Okay, so I was probably like 14 or 15, something like that.
Did you see it you saw it in theaters?
No, I saw it just like on a DVD at
Got it.
home, I think. So maybe a little bit later. At least, yeah. I mean, my memory is garbage, but I want to say I saw it just from a DVD on home.
Okay.
And because I had seen a trailer for it somehow, I want to say like I think we had like DirecTV or something, and sometimes they would show trailers for like movies you could rent
Yeah.
on DirecTV.
Yeah.
And so I think I saw that and I was like, oh my God, that looks crazy. But anyways, it was such a spectacular achievement in filmmaking that I kind of from that moment forward was like, I want to make stories. I want to make movies. Like
Yeah.
it was so beautiful in the cinematography.
Was that the first time you had watched a movie and felt like inspired to do that?
I think so because I remember watching like Lord of the Rings and like that was like I was obsessed with the Lord of the Rings, but I was obsessed with like the universe and I never really was like, oh, that makes me want to make movies. I was just obsessed with Lord of the Rings. Where I remember seeing like Saving Private Ryan and I was like, oh my God, that's so like realistic and like powerful and stuff. But again, it wasn't necessarily like sparking me to be like, oh, go try to make something like Saving Private Ryan. But I saw Pan's Labyrinth and I was like, I've never seen anything like this. I've never seen this level of like violence matched with a fairy tale and like centered around the main character being a child and like just the creature design and
Yeah.
like you said, like the cinematography, the colors, especially like in the final battle where the rebels or resistance, whatever it was called, it's just like these like crazy colors and stuff. And then the thing that really hit for me, I've always been a sucker for like a very powerful score or music or something. And the lullaby in this has never escaped my head since I saw this the very first. Like the lullaby is probably my favorite thing in this movie. It's just that lullaby.
And yeah, it's beautiful that she just hums it and it sticks with you. And I just want to shout out the person who did the music. I'm not going to pronounce this right, but
Oh, it's okay. I wouldn't know.
Javier Navarrete. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. He did the music. This movie, like in terms of I don't want to call it below the line, but it won 3 Oscars for cinematography, production design, and makeup. We can all agree, very well deserved.
Yeah.
But Daniel, to your point, like Lord of the Rings and Saving Private Ryan, you watch those movies and you know that someone who made it cared about it, obviously. But when you watch it, it's almost like you don't even think about like someone, a person could make this. It doesn't even feel like Lord of the Rings. When I watched that movie, I'm like, what do you mean? They just like went to craft services after they shot the scene? Like it doesn't even, you don't even process it because it's so immersive. Same with Private Ryan in that same way, in a different kind of, it puts you in a different mood, obviously, but in the same way.
Yeah. Yeah.
When I watch Pan's Labyrinth or when I watch any Guillermo Del Toro movie, and like, even before I knew who the guy was, there's always this feeling of like, oh, this guy really cared about this.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
when the faun shows up, it makes me want to cry. It made me want to cry last night But not because it was emotional, but just because I'm like, oh my god, like they spent so much time making this guy look like this, and that's like a human, and it feels like there's this like handmade touch to it that
Totally.
I respond to a lot. So I totally understand why watching this, it's kind of just like this. Holy shit! I kind of want to do that.
Yeah, I was just blown away that someone could actually make this. Like you said, the other ones, they're so spectacular, they're so immersive, you almost forget that they're a movie. You're just in it. Whereas like this, I don't want to say it in a negative way, but you know it's a movie, but I want to say that in a positive way, that
appreciate.
Yeah, you can appreciate like, oh my god, they loved this.
Well, it's that again. It's that hand. Like, there's a little bit more of a handmade quality to this. That
Yeah.
I think that's kind of what you're responding to. Is that there is spectacle in this movie, and there are things where I'm still like, how the fuck did they do this? But it still feels like, oh, these were made by humans that were very. That are very dorky about this kind of stuff. And I mean that in such a loving way. I mean, like Guillermo Del Toro and Doug Jones got together and they were like obsessive over how this guy was going to look.
Yeah.
What about you, Chris?
I think that kicked for me most with the Pale Man scene.
Oh my God.
Because I've seen that somewhere. I've similar deal. I've seen the image of him with the hands as a kid.
I'm pretty sure, I don't know if you guys agree with this, but I'm pretty sure that's like probably the most iconic image from this movie.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I think just the way, especially like the way that moment was executed, because I first watched it like either early college or late high school. We, watched the first half, so it took me 3 sittings to finish it, just to remind. But I didn't finish it for different reasons. I never turned it off deliberately. It was always like
You always felt that Ophelia should have been a man. That was your take.
Yeah, it's always these horrible opinions. No, but the buildup though of the Pale Man, of seeing like the paintings on the wall, not a word spoken. You know what I mean? They don't describe what she's going to see. They just say, "Don't eat anything on the table. It's dangerous." And you kind of are forced to put the pieces together with her before it even happens. And so, you see the paintings on the wall of this fucking thing eating babies and children. And then you see a pile of shoes, like tiny little shoes. It's the most like disturbing thing I've ever seen.
I know. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying, I think I appreciated it more, watching it for the 3rd time now. But I think also because like I was able to pick up on some of the thematic parallels it was going for, that it was like happening kind of at the same time as like, while the other scene, the captain and them were all having dinner together, and then they were talking about how they were restricting the food to, help starve the rebels to, reduce their resources. Like a lot of the tasks that Ophelia goes through are very much thematic parallels to like what's happening in, the actual world.
Okay, so I think this is a good transition to start talking about her meeting the faun and then getting those 3 tasks. So I was telling Chris this over the phone yesterday. I was like, man, when the faun shows up, it's like the best shit ever. Like, I was freaking out because I was like, this guy shows up and he's immediately a little stinker. He's like moving around and he's
like creepy but funny at the same time. Like, you're trying to get a read on him. Kind of the whole movie, you're trying to get an idea.
There's
like,
something
do I
for
trust this thing, or is this,
There's something about it, and I know a lot of it has to do just with the fact that it's like practical makeup and all that stuff. But there's something so goofy about it, and I mean that in a loving way. It is so like, it makes me so happy that it doesn't feel like just this CGI blob that they add in there.
Yeah.
Even like the sorry to cut.
No,
it,
go
but
ahead.
even like when he would like kind of like shake a little bit, like shake out his like body.
His little twitchy movements when he's like walking.
the jitteriness of it is amazing. But I think I really clock the voice a lot. Because it's Doug Jones as both the faun, and he did the Pale Man. He's also Guillermo Del Toro's like dude. Like he does a lot of his stuff. He's like his Boris Karloff, I was saying, like the guy who did Frankenstein. He's like the modern day version of that, where he's like, yeah, I'll put on any makeup you give me. And that was Doug Jones. But then the voice of it and the narrator of the movie was Pablo Adan, and his voice was like borderline seductive at some point. I kept saying to Chris over the phone, I was just like, I just love the way he says no mas preguntas. And I just like, I want to say that over and over again. Samantha, I want to ask you, you're watching this movie with Daniel all those years ago. You sit down, you're like, okay, this is full-on foreign film. Got it. We're sitting down. This is like it's in a fascist regime. This is like a, and then the faun shows up. What's your response?
I was like, is this the same movie? What's happening here?
Yeah.
Like, what's going on? And then just this is a fairy tale. Like, this is essentially like coping for everything going on right now. So it was definitely a shock. Honestly, I think the Pale Man more so than the faun, just as like the kind of scary. But I think even with the faun, even the second time now or recent time watching it, I was like, like he seems kind of sinister, but I want to like him and he's helping her. Like it was kind of this like weird, I don't know if I can trust you throughout most of the film.
That's a great way to put it. I think the thing I was thinking about a lot too is just from a kid's perspective, adults can be both like welcoming and safe and be scary at the same time.
Yeah.
Because you, as a kid, like sometimes you can trust the wrong people, you can make mistakes, but also there's adults that are looking out for the best for their kids, like parents or whatever. But there is this like mystique about them, you know? And I think that's kind of how I looked at the faun, is just like what you said, Samantha. I'm like, I don't know if I should be scared of this guy, if should be worried for Ophelia, if he's going to turn out to be like a demon at the end, or if he's there to help, you know? Chris, what was it like the third time watching it? Did you finally accept the faun?
Did I finally start liking it? No, I mean, the faun's great. I've seen, I didn't connect the dots until I was older when I watched it, but there's a YouTuber named Artie, the strongest man in the world, or his full name is Brandon Hardesty. He's an old school YouTuber, but his thing used to be reenacting movie scenes. He would play every role and edit it in such a way, and it was always really janky and DIY, which is always really funny. But he did that intro of the faun from Pan's Labyrinth. He didn't speak Spanish, but he just recited it. But he cut out little paper blue eyes and like little paper antlers and like he did the whole scene like wearing like a blue t-shirt.
Vuestras madre ha mejorado, Alteza.
That's so cool though.
But so I always kind of had this like fondness of the faun.
Nice.
Nice. Very good.
And thank you.
We all approve.
But so I didn't really pick up on the trustworthy elements until I was old, like watching it now.
Sure.
When I was kind of, because before I just took it at face value. It was like, oh, this is the cool, like, he's like Hagrid or something in Harry Potter. Like the guy that's going to introduce her and, you can trust
take
because
you
everyone
into
else
this world.
sucks,
Yeah, for sure.
But then I think upon like the next task coming up, especially when he's giving her the third task, when he's not even letting her question, hey, we need your brother. No more, no más preguntas.
No más preguntas.
No more questions. I think that's when I was like, oh wait, something weird's going on. Because at that point, I haven't even finished the movie yet, so now I'm actually like fully like fascinated
What's
and hooked.
happening?
But there's just something so beautifully weird about it. Like he'll just show up and he'll be like, okay, it's great to have you back. Take this root that wanted to be a human, put it under your mom's bed. What?
2 drops of blood. Here's a box of fairies that are going to guide you.
And it's just so, it's so like, again, beautiful in that way.
Totally.
Okay. So he gives her 3 tasks. And basically, what's the goal here? Like after the 3 tasks,
they're basically getting pieces to help unlock the labyrinth. Basically, the first one was to get the key out of the toad, from under the tree, and then the second task is using the key to unlock the thing. But they're all connected to kind of open the portal to get to the underworld.
Right, and I think Ophelia is also, the way I look at it is like she's using these tasks. It's her way of just being like, okay, I feel like everything around me I have no control over. My mom's asking me to call this like menace a dad. He's not my dad. I'm supposed to wear these clothes and look nice, and I'm supposed to shake hands and be a good girl. I have no control. And she's finally given this like work to do. She's like, these 3 tasks are very important to the universe or whatever the stakes
with
are.
the promise of, basically taking her away from all that. Essentially.
Well, exactly. Being able to fully escape. And like, if I was watching this as a kid, I'd be like, hell yeah, let's do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
So the first, go ahead.
I would just say, do you want to go over the first task? I know you got so stoked.
I was about to get to it.
Cool.
So, and I want to know everyone's thoughts as well. The first task is that there's this tree that this fat toad is living under that's causing that's preventing the tree from fully blossoming. And now when the faun's like, there's going to be this tree there, there's going to be this toad there, I know Guillermo Del Toro, and I know it's like there's probably going to be a big fat toad in there. I know. And then
get ready.
When she's going into she goes into the tree and you see those branches. First of all, the set design looks so cool. Shouting out production designer who won the Oscar, Eugenio Caballero. He won the Oscar for this movie. Great job. Now the camera turns around and then there's this big fat toad. I told Chris that I was in that couch over there and I just like cheered by myself. I'm like, it's a fat toad.
I knew it.
He did.
That's awesome.
What's your guys' like capacity for the kind of stuff that's about to happen where the toad, like, its tongue inflates and it goes inside out? Do you guys have like a gross factor capacity where you like kind of check out when it gets too gross, or are you guys all like, let's get deeper into it?
Yes, lean into that.
I do not like vomit or anything like that of any kind. Like, that's my line.
I love vomit. No, I'm kidding.
So, I mean, it brings me back to like, there's like Stand By Me or like even Team America.
Oh yeah, you haven't seen Team America, Altaf.
Yeah,
we'll show it to you.
Okay.
We'll show it to you. We'll get.
So a little bit of the regurgitation was not
pleasant.
Yeah,
It wasn't very cute.
Yeah, for me.
Yeah, for me, I don't know what comes first. I want to say one of the most, I guess, dramatic sequences for me is actually when the captain smashes the guy's face with a bottle.
That's early on. Yeah, that's before the toad. Yeah.
So I think that set up the rest of the movie for me to be like, I'm prepared to see anything because I just saw a man's face get caved in by a bottle.
Yeah.
So it's like when the toad comes and stuff and it like kind of, throws up and stuff, I'm like, okay, that was gross, but that wasn't as gross as the previous scene. So I'm still fully like in this. Plus, I'm still like very much in the imagination because it's just a tree, but also like Ophelia is like, she's climbing like through this tree for a while. Like it's like a deep tunnel that she's going. So it's like, you kind of play in the imagination of like, it's a magical tree because a normal tree, like she would barely just be able to stand up inside it. This is like almost her kind of walking to this like magical portal. So I'm, with these giant like roly-polies or cockroach, whatever those were and stuff. So I'm still very easy to transition into like the imagination aspect of what like Ophelia is seeing.
Well, that's like, I think, as a kid, I just want to point out, as a kid, my favorite stuff in like a fantasy or magical movie, I'm thinking of Harry Potter specifically, is like when something would look small from the outside, but then you go in, it's bigger.
Willy Wonka does that too.
Oh my God. But like in Goblet of Fire in Harry Potter, I remember they're like, okay, this is the tent. And they go in the tent and it's like a mansion. And I'm like, whoa, like, yay. It's always exciting.
I think there's a horror movie that did that too, in like a scary way, which is kind of cool. They were like stuck inside of an asylum that was like, they locked themselves in and they're like, okay, bad things are happening, let's get out of here. And they unlock it and they open the doors to the front and it's more hallway. Yeah. And they're just like, what the fuck? Like, we're stuck in here.
So
I think that's such a classic like kid thing too. Like if you give a kid a big box, they could go inside a big box and be like, oh, this is my spaceship, this is my race car. Like you have scenes in like SpongeBob where SpongeBob and Patrick
the idiot box episode of SpongeBob was, as a kid, one of my favorite episodes.
All the sound effects coming from the box.
Yeah.
But yeah, no. It's like ultimate fantasy stuff. But yeah, I think, Daniel, that's a great point that you brought up of seeing the guy's head getting smashed is a good preface, because I noticed that like, Guillermo del Toro is not doing the thing that you usually see in movies, which he's about to do something really violent, but we're just going to cut to a close-up of the guy doing it so we don't see it. No, but when the captain is smashing, who you find out is an innocent guy's face.
Yeah.
The thing, we're full on seeing his face getting smashed in.
Right in front of his father, too.
And
That's graphic.
You could look at it at first I could see someone being like, well, that's a bit gratuitous. But I think it's a great point, is that it kind of sets up the game of this movie, is that everything, the magical parts, we're going to show you head on, but the violence is also going to be head on. We're confronting all of it directly. in a way that feels earned, and it doesn't feel unnecessary.
Yeah, and it highlights the contrast between like the two, I guess, ideologies that the movie presents, essentially, of like the grim realities of war, and then also, yeah, like the fairy tale fantasy escapism element. And if it has to show both of them in their most like visceral forms for you to fully get it.
I want to talk a little bit about, before we get to the, I guess, the second tasks. I want to talk a little bit about the villain, who I found more fascinating than I thought I would from the beginning of the movie.
Yeah.
Beginning of the movie, I'm like, okay, cool, evil guy, got it. You know what I mean? And I loved the scenes where he's like working on the watch and constantly checking his dad's watch.
Yeah.
Or like we just see him polishing shoes. We just see him shaving. Like every scene, it felt like this guy held the burden of his dad's legacy. Like he was constantly just feeling like, gotta keep my shoes clean, gotta make sure I look clean, check my watch every time I'm remembering why I'm doing this, because my dad smashed the clock right before he died so his son would remember. And it's like legacy is so important for him, and he has to keep that alive. But I love that. That's like a very human thing. At least I feel this all the time, of having to feel like I have to live up to something. And for this guy, it's like some of the most horrible shit that he's doing, but he feels like he has to, because he has to live up to something.
Yeah, and it pays off really, like we talked about on the phone prior, but like nice and ironically that, they kind of paid off him shaving his face, and then by the end of the movie, he's looking in the same mirror but sewing his face back together.
Oh, yeah.
After like being careful shaving, and then he had his whole like freaking cut in his cheek.
Yeah. How do you guys feel about the villain?
I think he's fascinating. I totally agree. He has that aspect of like being burdened by, his expectations, or, his father's legacy and stuff. And he's needs to create his own legacy. He's also hyper, can't think of the word, but he's very focused on continuing his legacy with, making sure he has a son that can keep the name and everything. So it's all about that. Plus he's also like, sometimes you have a villain where they have like their henchman or something who does the torturing, or you have a villain who has soldiers who goes out, like he is the one torturing, he's the one leading the charge in the forest, running up and be like, this is the best way to die, like he's not off in the back or something. Like
I talk about this with Chris all the time. I love a villain that will just go out and do that. Because it makes it more compelling to me. Like the scene that reminds me of what you just said is when, like, in the woods, when the rebels are out there shooting, he is just straight up there with a handgun going after it. Like he's not being like, come on, go. Like he's doing it himself. Yeah. And immediately it makes it more compelling than a guy sitting at a throne.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, even, like if you think of like Darth Vader, even when we first meet him, he walks right into the ship and is like choking the dude with his bare hand. You know what I mean? Like he's the one doing it. He's not having henchmen do it. It just creates a stronger villain when they're out in the mud,
Samantha, like, how did you feel watching this villain? Because I'm just like, I remember you were the one referencing like the handshake and everything. Were you able to watch it? Because I can also see someone watching this and just feeling like, fuck this guy the entire time.
Yeah, that was me.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I didn't have any type of feelings about, this legacy he's trying to do, or I'm like, fuck this guy. Yeah. I don't like him. I think I even said in our rewatch that I was like, this is probably one of the worst villains in a movie.
Yeah, I mean, they give him so many things that makes him disgusting. Like even from the very beginning, how he just squeezes Ophelia's hand, like you said. Yeah. Like, from that moment on, you're like, okay, this guy's just an asshole.
Yeah, I mean, you're an asshole to kids, like.
Yeah.
It's the worst type of asshole.
Well, that's what I love about this character, is that I think both are true. You can watch it and just be like, no, screw this guy. And you can also watch it with just being like, okay, who is this guy? And I think both can be true. But Samantha, to your point, I do like how the movie towards the end, when he's just like, I want my son to tell my son to remember me, or whatever, when he's like wanting to make sure the legacy of him stays alive within his son, the way his dad's legacy stayed alive with him. And Mercedes just like, no, he's not even going to remember your name. And then she just shoot him. It's very rare to see a scene like that in a movie where they're just like, dude, fuck you. And they just kill the villain.
They just completely obliterate everything he's been living for, essentially, just like that.
Yeah. I mean, I think I yelled. Like, I was like, yes!
I think there's a couple of like moments where, the bad guy finally gets it, and you're like, hell yeah. Like,
Have you guys have seen Aliens?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
I mean,
Scene in Aliens?
For Burke.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah,
well, then
right,
there's
yeah.
also the get away from her, you bitch, and it's all it's
Right.
like
Yes,
it's
Alien, yeah.
it's just like very like satisfying movie shit. Yeah.
Have you guys seen Game of Thrones?
Yes.
We've seen up to like season 7, but we know all the spoilers for season 8 and everything.
Okay,
too.
so like to tie in with like the whole legacy aspect, like I love the cutoff in this movie, like you talked about. Like you don't really see that very often, where like the main villain, they usually get their final speech or something like that. They might not get what they wanted, but they'll say something. Whereas this is like they don't even let them finish talking, and they're like, "No, you're not. Fuck you. You're not getting any of this. Bang, headshot. You're done." So I love that. And then another scene that reminds me of is Ramsay Bolton, I think, in Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
Sansa has a moment where she's like, history will forget you. No one will remember your name. Your legacy will die. Like everything you wanted, your legacy, never gonna happen. Like I feel like that's such the ultimate fuck you to a villain.
Yeah, you're
It's
gonna
like,
be known,
yeah.
at least for Game of Thrones' sake, you're gonna be known as a guy that was a piece of shit that got eaten by dogs, like by your own dogs.
Yeah. I mean, Tywin Lannister obviously has a great arc with that too. Not arc, but similar deal. He was all about family and legacy.
And he died on the toilet.
Died on the toilet by his own son.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's that feeling of like what this movie tackles is like, listen, man, you didn't earn this. I know you want it. I know you want this. Like you did this all for a reason that you thought was right and everything, but you don't earn your son getting to know your name. Like, and
Right.
I think that's what's kind of interesting and beautiful about that in a way.
Yeah. I know it's a really satisfying payoff for sure.
Okay, so there's also a handful of characters that I just like. I just want to mention.
Quick shout outs,
Love the Doctor.
Yes.
I love a guy in any kind of movie that's just like, man, that's a guy that's just like a stand-up dude.
He's a man with integrity.
Integrity. That's a man just with integrity. That small scene where he's in the rebels tent and he has to cut off that guy's leg, and the guy is looking at the doctor. He's like, "Doctor, just 1 second." And it cuts to the doctor, and he's kind of teary-eyed, and he's like, "Okay, go." That's a human moment. That's such a small human moment that I feel like only a filmmaker like Guillermo Del Toro would just add in. He's about to cut this guy's leg off. Many filmmakers would just get very excited to be like, I'm going to have my big gross scene where I get to cut a guy's leg off. And Guillermo Del Toro makes it about grief and makes it about like the casualties of what they're trying to do. They all believe in something, but this is what they lose. Yeah. And it's also that man looking at his leg one last time. He's like, this is the last time I'm going to have this.
Yeah. He taps into the emotion behind it. I think even I remember, oh man, I'm totally drawing a blank, but the creator, the lead director for From Software video games, do you know his name, Daniel? For Bloodborne and Dark Souls and those games.
No, I know what you're talking about though, but no, I don't remember the
But
name.
I remember hearing an anecdote from like one of his lead developers who showed him a creature design, and he was saying like, he basically said, I don't like this because you're focusing on what's grotesque and I'm seeing all of that, but I'm not seeing the despair that this creature is in. You know what I mean? And I think Guillermo del Toro has a lot of that. He focuses very much on like the emotions behind the grotesque imagery or some of the shocking scenes, and that it gives it like a nicer layer, another dimension.
Okay, and this is a great transition to let's talk about the Pale Man.
Yeah.
So she gets this chalk and she was like, put it on the wall. You can just go in there. I remember getting so giddy when she draws out the chalk and there's like the secret door. I'm like, yay!
It's like Harry Potter shit.
And she goes in and there's just this like immediately there's just like this dude there. His eyes are on like on a plate.
Yeah.
And she sees this feast and it's the classic like dumb kid thing where they can't help themselves. Those grapes look amazing. I will say those grapes are like the best looking grapes I've ever seen.
It reminds me of the feast in Hook. Have you guys seen Hook?
Yeah.
You haven't seen Hook, but do you know what I'm talking about?
I know the
feast scene's the famous scene, where he uses his imagination, all those colorful ice creams and stuff.
Yeah.
And so they do a good job of like, okay, I get it. But like the fairies are just like, dude, no, like stop
idiot.
it. And I just like goosebumps ran down my arm when his like fingers move right when she eats it, and like the sound design of it. It's like
Yes.
the sound design. Not to get too dorky about it, but the sound design makes it feel like that guy's been sitting there for like thousands of years. Like,
Yeah, just finally awakening.
But in a very, I don't know if you guys felt this or if I'm reading into this, but Guillermo Del Toro, it's no secret that this man loves monsters and has like an actual affection for them. Not just in a way of just like they're so cool and they look disgusting, but actually has his love for them. And you can watch Shape of Water and see that. But I feel like when he shows the Pale Man's scary, and it is a scary scene and it's tense. But when he puts his eyeballs in his hands and is just running around, there's this feeling I have from this scene where I'm like, oh, this guy's just lost and he's been there for just so long. And he just feels a little lost.
He's just confused at the same time as going after her.
The way he puts his hands on his forehead and that's how he sees, it is scary. And as a kid, that would terrify me. But watching this as an adult, I'm like, this guy's just been lonely for so long. And I don't know if I'm reading into that or if it, like, but that's kind of what the feeling it gave me.
Sure, I can see that. Yeah. I mean, it reminds me, I remember Mark Hamill talked about that with, are they called the Wampa? You know, the Yeti in Empire Strikes Back?
Yeah.
I think he was always kind of defensive of the Wampa. He's like, no, he's not a monster. He's just hungry. He's just a meat eating, like the same way you look at like a polar bear or something. You know?
I gotta say, really shocked that again I shouldn't have been. Because we, again, like you said, Daniel, we saw a guy's head getting smashed in head on, and that was like a very human, grounded moment. I was still shocked that the Pale Man just takes like the fairy and bites his head off. And again, Guillermo del Toro doesn't cut away. We are seeing the head being ripped off.
Yeah, just like licking the blood off its fingers. You're like, Jesus Christ.
And I do love how the faun later is just like, yo, what the fuck, man? I gave you one rule and you killed two of my fairies. No, yeah, we made a mistake.
Like,
I'm out of here.
It deliberately told you, like, do whatever, no matter how tempting it is, do not eat them.
But before I keep going, any thoughts on the Pale Man watching this movie now? How did he make you feel? Were you like looking at it being like, that looks cool? Does it still scare you? You know?
I think though a lot of these tasks, and I think it was like more apparent with the Pale Man versus the Toad, was a lot of the tasks for Ophelia, they kind of were in a like backwards way teaching her like disobedience in all of this. And she would end up having to use that, you know, later in the film. So I think that was really interesting to see kind of that coming to the forefront. With the Toad, it was kind of seemed like, oh, I'll be sneaky about how I'll get these stones in. But her, you know, selecting the wrong box on purpose. I think she was just genuinely hungry.
Yeah, because she didn't get supper before that task. But that's a good point with like the whole disobedience. It's interesting because it's like sometimes obviously the disobedience is bad, but also it's so many characters in this are disobedient to who's in charge technically, but they're doing it for the greater good, or doing it for the good. So that's a very interesting thing because even like in the first task, she's technically disobedient to her mom who wanted her to be like all clean and princess like for the dinner and stuff, but she's in there, you know, rolling around in the mud and stuff.
Yeah, destroying her dress.
Yeah, destroying the dress and stuff. And for the second one, she's disobedient with what the fairies are saying. She doesn't pick the box that they tell her. She's disobedient with eating the food, but that's also such like a kid thing.
I
like
know.
if you put like food in front of a kid and you're like, okay, don't eat any of that. I'm gonna go to the other room and I'll be right back. You're gonna come back. That food's gonna be gone. Like, you know.
Yeah, and also it's that thing of like what you guys, Samantha, what you guys said is just like that kid probably eats like bread and soup all day, so she sees all this like fruit, and she's like, "What do you mean?"
I know, it is kind of funny because there's a giant monster right in front of the food, and there's artwork of the monster eating children and a pile of shoes. It's just kind of funny where it's like there's like such a deliberate warning.
Don't do this.
Even the fairies are like, don't. Like,
they're like trying to hit her, like, stop.
Yeah. I love the fairies like crossing their arms, just like, hey, listen, dude, no.
I know, and you're watching, you're like, kids are so stupid.
I know.
Yeah.
I mean, like, that's the thing about this movie is though, like everything feels so considered and thought out. Just like the hallway she walks through, like they discussed it for, like they had like 30 meetings about probably just that hallway. You know what I mean?
Right.
And A thing that I was surprised by is that this is like, unless I'm wrong, this is not like based off of anything. This is an original story.
I think it is, but I think it's like a culmination of a lot of things.
Old
Like
folklore.
fables, yeah.
Yeah.
yes, yeah.
That's so impressive to me. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you could definitely see like some themes in kind of each task and stuff, but it's not necessarily. It doesn't feel like it's something that came from something else. It
Yeah.
just feels like its own unique thing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Listen, kid acting can be tough. It's a tough like hill, and Chris is really good about not criticizing child actors. Like I can be a little harsh sometimes. Chris is really good. Like, hey, listen, man. Like
It's hard working with clunky dialogue. Imagine being a child reading clunky dialogue. Sometimes I feel that way.
yeah, exactly. And the actress who plays Ophelia, and I'm definitely not going to mispronounce her name. It's Ivana Baquero. She plays Ophelia. She is just brilliant in this movie.
Yeah, she's phenomenal.
Yes.
It's all in the eyes. Like I feel so much for her. You know what I mean? In every scene, I want her to be safe. I want her to, but it's like that thing of just like, it's like what you guys said as parents, like you want them to take risks, but you also want them to be safe. And
Yeah.
her eyes like make you feel that sympathy and connection with her immediately.
Yeah, and I heard Guillermo Del Toro did rewrites to suit her age because I guess they were originally casting for younger actresses, but they thought she was so perfect for it, but she was just a little old. So I heard he did rewrites to kind of better suit her.
Yeah.
Too, which is pretty cool. You know, he like just like, okay, yeah, she's perfect. I'll work around this, basically. You know.
Oh yeah, no, I mean she's just brilliant. I mean, there's so many scenes where it's just like it's on her.
Yeah.
Like she has to
Yeah.
she has to sell it really hard.
Yeah, that's no joke. You know, carrying a movie like that.
I mean, yeah, she did such a great job acting. I mean, there's so much, like you said, asked of her for, you know, there's obviously some probably CGI where she's having to interact with just, you know, a character. The extreme like traumatic stuff, like coming out and seeing like your mom very pregnant and like blood everywhere.
Yeah.
Like that's such a shocking thing for a kid to see, losing your parent and how she has to act after that, and how kind of almost motherly and protective, or big sister, whatever you want to say, when she does finally get her brother. Just spectacular acting in that. And I think there's just so many moments too that I really like, of kind of like what you were touching on, the disobedience, like how the doctor puts the one stuttering guy out of his misery.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Oh my god. Yeah, the torture sequences we haven't even really like discussed.
Oh, I know. When he says like, hey, just count to 3.
So rough.
Terrible.
Yeah.
I speaking on the doctor, like when he's when the villain comes in, finds out that he let that guy die, and he was just kind of like confronts like him head on. The doctor walks away. You immediately know he's gonna die.
Yeah.
Like there's no way he gets to say that shit to him and just walk away with a suitcase. But there's something about him getting shot and then slowly taking his glasses off. It's so great.
He faced his death like a G, basically, is what it is. He knew what was happening. He was like, I'm going to go out.
It really
keeping
is.
my shit intact. You know what I mean? You're not going to scare me.
It's
You're not gonna take
such a
anything
great
from me.
moment because it's literally like, all right, so I guess this is it.
Yeah.
Like it's so.
I think there's so many like memorable little touches, kind of like you guys touched on, that little pause before cutting off the leg completely transforms that scene.
Yes.
The doctor walking away knowing he's about to get shot in the back and taking his glasses off, like that's such a different scene than if the doctor was just like standing there and just got shot and died or something.
Guillermo del Toro in this movie is really good at like showing character through a simple task or behavior. So like the way Mercedes, like in the beginning when she's like chopping up vegetables and everything, and she like cleans her knife.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
her just routine. And then later on, when she straight up slashes that guy's like mouth, and she does the same thing as she's walking away. Like that's still her routine. That's still who she is as a person. She like wants to maintain some sort of control.
It's just brilliant characterization.
It's like a simple like behavioral thing that I feel like adds so much flavor to a character rather than just being a person that a guy wrote. If they feel like someone who's alive.
Yeah.
Even the villain like checking his stopwatch, periodically throughout. It's just a quick, half a second scene, but it tells you so much about him.
Yeah,
Totally. It's I think Guillermo Del Toro has talked about how like he creates these like big, expansive like character Bibles that he always offers to the actors if they want it and everything, but he does that just so he knows like their life before the movie and after. Like that's the way he's talked about it. Have you guys seen Shape of Water?
Yes.
Yeah.
I remember he talked about Shape of Water. I know Chris hasn't seen it, but this is not a spoiler. But I remember Shape of Water, he was working with Richard Jenkins, and he gave Richard Jenkins that character Bible. And Richard Jenkins was like, you know, some actors don't kind of want all that backstory. They want to figure something out. And Richard Jenkins is like, this is lovely, Guillermo. I understand that you put a lot of work into it, but like, no, I'm not using this. And Guillermo Del Toro was like, yeah, fair enough, man. You're Richard Jenkins. You probably know more about acting than I do. But this, and it's just like, it just proved that like you ask him, it's kind of like what people say about Tarantino. Like you ask him any question about what clothing this guy wears, that guy, Guillermo Del Toro will have an
or their
answer.
favorite food, or anything like that.
Everything's considered.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah, I think, okay, cool. I think we've kind of basically touched on most things that I wanted to touch on before we get to like the final third act. So her final task is that she has to bring her brother to the labyrinth.
Yeah, and of which the faun specifically said, like, don't ask why or anything, just get
Sorry,
the
what
kid.
does he say?
No más preguntas.
Thank you. Well, I love that moment when she hugs him, because that's how I feel. And the faun shows up again. Like, I'm also like, okay, take me away from all this bullshit.
Well, because they had like a pseudo falling out after, she failed to obey the second task.
Yeah.
And then when she sees him again after everything, like you said, after she lost her mom and the captain like called her a bitch and all this stuff.
It's okay. So yeah, that's one thing I will say. The mom dies.
Yeah.
This movie doesn't pull any punches in making sure this child goes through all the trials and tribulations you could go through. That could be so traumatizing, right? Like it doesn't pull back at all. Like the mom straight up dies. I gotta stress that. Like that's crazy to me. And when she sees the faun again, it's kind of just like, take me away from this, She uses the chalk, gets the kid. Obviously, the captain goes after her.
Yeah, because she poisoned him.
I'm curious what you guys think, because she obviously goes through this like hidden like the wall opens up, she goes in, and like she's obviously asked to like give the kid to the faun. It's like the blood of an innocent,
Yeah, which she doesn't know until she gets to the faun.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Like she says no. Which I think I wanted to bring up, like how she's gone through every like traumatizing event you could go through as a kid. The fact that she still says no is such a big deal, because she's like, even if I have to stay in this fucked up world, I have to do the right thing.
She didn't let the world corrupt her, basically.
Yeah, and it's that's another theme in this movie, and I think, Samantha, you brought this up when you were kind of giving us some notes that you wanted to talk about, is that doing the right thing despite the situation around you. That small scene that Mercedes has with her lover who's part of the rebellion, where she's like, maybe the doctor's right, we should just run away, this is not worth it.
Was it her brother or lover?
Her brother.
It was her brother.
Did I say her lover?
You said lover, yeah.
Wow. Completely misinterpreted that. Holy shit. That's amazing.
Yeah, no, it was her brother.
I didn't think that at all.
Just didn't want that one to slip by for lirs. We're
I was
like,
like, wait. I mean, second guess.
Altaf,
You never know.
Altaf, you saw this movie differently. No. Her brother, I do like that moment when the doctor's like, maybe the doctor's right, we should just run off. And he looks at her and he's just like, we'll make it a little bit harder for him. And I think I think about that all the time when thinking about all the stuff that we go through in this world. When it comes to, we're living in an election year where climate change is always this like dooming threat. And there's all this stuff that I get anxious about, and I constantly think about, like, what's the point of even trying to save it? With climate change, it's already bad. Scientists have talked about how it's so bad. What's the point in still trying? Election year, it's all fucked anyways. Why are we giving a shit about who we vote for? And it's that one line that says it all. Just, we'll make it a little bit harder for him. If there's like any type of work that you can do as a functioning citizen of the world, not just America, but just of the world, is that try your best to make it a little bit better.
Yeah.
And that's what Ophelia's final move is. Like, I don't care how messed up everything around me is. I can't do this. I can't like squash my moral integrity.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It was very moving. That like moment was very moving to me when he just says to her, "It's like we'll make it a little bit harder for him," because it's like the thing I think about all the time. And I'm sure you guys have probably thought about that as parents of just being like, "Damn, man, this world's tough," you know.
Yeah, no, I mean, we've thought about that a lot, and just how we look at things now that we have a daughter, and I mean, a girl, number one,
Yeah.
but with everything going on, and also just, like, there's going to be a time where we're not here, and she needs to live on with what we're leaving behind.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So I mean, you got to prepare them for the realities of the world and how difficult things really are. So it's definitely a constant thought of just like sometimes you can look at a situation and kind of be turned off by like, is there even any point in trying to improve this? But I think if we all strive to kind of to get preachy on a soapbox or something, but if everyone just tries to do at least one nice thing to try to make something a little bit better, like, hey, things can actually change. Maybe you by yourself, you don't see the bigger picture of how your actions can affect things, but if enough things stack on top of each other, things can ultimately change. And obviously now we have a much greater responsibility to try to leave the world a better place than we entered it, if that's the saying or something. Because we are leaving behind a legacy in our daughter that, you know, hopefully we improved her situation or her world or something like that. And I mean, I think that fight against like whatever the man or whatever you want to say is very important. I mean, even I have like there's a song that I really like. I forgot the exact lyrics, but the band is called From First to Last. But there's a point in it where it was like, I'm gonna make you earn it or something like that. So it's almost like even if someone's coming after you or someone's like, all right, you might get the better of me, but like I'm gonna put up a fight and like I'm gonna make you earn this. So it's the same thing with like the resistance. It's not like he's like, oh, we're gonna beat him, we can do it. It was, no, we're gonna make things, if we fail, we're gonna make things hard for him up until the very end.
Yeah, it's like the V for Vendetta, you know, ideas are bulletproof, you know.
Yeah. It's like the best you can really do. Now, here's the thing. This movie starts with a shot of like the blood going back into her nose. It starts like in media res kind of. So you know there's something that's going to happen to Ophelia. I forgot about that while watching the movie, and then when it comes back to that shot, I'm like, "Oh yeah," because the captain, you know, just straight up shoots her. Again, we see him shoot her, which is an insane scene for me. I was watching and I'm like, "Oh my god."
Oh yeah, you're not supposed to do that in movie.
Like that's not in E.T., Elliot doesn't just die. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's
just gun down the alien and, and the kids.
Dorothy doesn't get taken by the witch. Like it's like insane for me. And I wanted to reject it so hard.
I know. You want to just think like, oh, someone's gonna undo this.
It's gonna be the thing where she like hums to her the lullaby, and then she like
the power of love heals her.
Yeah, and like Ophelia decides that like they give her a choice: you can come join us, or you can go back to your life. And Ophelia decides to go back, and I thought that was gonna happen. I was like waiting for it, and it doesn't. And it's interesting because like I said towards the beginning of this podcast, I was like, "What the fuck? This is so sad." And I think thinking about it more is she like it obviously the ending of the movie is about the princess comes and back and returns, and like what we were all just discussing right now is like to make the world a better place you have to sacrifice something, you have to fight for it, but you and like what I said in the beginning of the synopsis, you have to fight for the magic to stay alive. And Chris, what did you think about that move?
Yeah, it was interesting that it kind of like it turned out to kind of be a test at the end. You know, like the faun comes out and he's like, "You passed," you know?
Yeah.
But it was, like you said, it reinforces that, she didn't let the world corrupt her, you know?
Yeah.
And so whether or not it was real, obviously there's, you know, it's not like, it doesn't really interest me to get into like, do you think that was real or fake? It's like the ideas are there and the emotions are there, and that's all I care about personally.
Which is what the like, you know, what the movie cares about as well.
Exactly.
It's like, it doesn't quite matter if this is all in her head.
Yeah, even if it all was in her head, she does just die right there. The point is that she died with her heart intact, essentially.
And if it, you know, and also like, let's say if it wasn't real, Ophelia did take the captain out of his quarters, drug him, and so it was because of her that he died.
Yeah,
Because when
yeah.
he walks out, they're all surrounding him.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't have been able to corner him if it wasn't for her. So she did like put up that final fight, even if it wasn't real enough. She fought against
Made it a little harder, you know.
She made it a little harder. We usually end these episodes with like Chris and I asking each other, okay, how did this movie change you? But since this was our first like full experience with this movie, I think we'll go to you guys. So whoever wants to go first, Daniel or Samantha, how did this movie change you?
You want me to go first or you to go?
Because I feel like I kind of talked about it in the beginning, so I'm like trying to think of what
You can
like
always
picked
just-
why
yeah.
we picked the movie versus
It we don't. It doesn't really. We repeat ourselves all the time.
Yeah.
Okay.
The true point of this is just to kind of wrap up your thoughts. You know, so it doesn't matter if you said it before. It's all about just like putting a little bow on it.
Yeah.
Okay, you go first.
Yeah, so I think this movie it changed me obviously in shaping the course of where I was expecting my life to maybe go in terms of pursuing film. I did go to school for some film and stuff. Even though I might have pivoted back to engineering, I still very much have that passion to create stories, to make films, or to do whatever to keep kind of cultivating or flourishing with that creative aspect. And this movie really was kind of the birth of that. So I think it had just such a major impact at a young enough age where it just wowed me so much that I kind of hope to kind of keep that same like love and interest for movies, which has very much been kept alive with this reaction channel. But just appreciating and loving movies, whether I get to create them or not. I think this movie really kind of reinforced that love that is still here today. So kind of lasting a little legacy.
Oh, that's
it's
awesome.
It's always nice to like come back to one of your favorite movies for that reason, because it kind of just reminds you of who you were when you first watched it.
Yeah.
That's the
for
point
sure.
of our whole channel, is to just remind ourselves of like, oh yeah, this is why we are who we are.
Yeah, they're like little chapter markers, through your life.
And I think to like really tie into the very ending of the movie, it's like, how her Ophelia's legacy, or whether she was a princess or not, it can only be seen by whatever the end of the last quote is. It's like, for those who know where to look, or
Yes.
something. And it kind of has like the little flower blooming on the plum tree or whatever it was.
Yeah.
But that was one of the lines that really stuck with me, that it's like, for those who know where to look. So it's kind of like, it just ties into everything, where it's like the kids playing with the leaves and them looking and finding the enjoyment in that, or looking at a tough situation and, is it worth it to keep fighting for something positive or just give up? Well, look for the positive or stuff. So that is something that I want to try to have in my everyday life, is just, I want to be one of the people who knows where to look for that positive.
Yeah. It's important to be deliberate,
Yeah.
Samantha, it's your turn. Go.
Like shit. Well, for me, I think obviously this was such a big part of the start of our relationship.
Yeah.
And getting to know you. So I think this movie just has a special place in my heart, and getting to know you and seeing your interests and how that kind of aligned. And now that we have this channel, it feels like it's kind of come full circle, because this was so early in our relationship.
What kickstarted everything.
And yes, yeah. And then in terms of the film, and just, again, just now being parents and just kind of watching someone so innocent dealing with trauma and just wanting to protect her. And I think it just kind of reminds you to, as you're parenting, to just let them have this imagination and this innocence, because like the leaves, it's just one day it's
gone,
not there anymore. Yeah,
No.
that's just not, you're growing up and you don't have that anymore.
Yeah, like
I think it's
like
cool.
fostering that imagination.
Yes.
Yeah. I think it's cool that like both you and I, like, this movie meant something so long ago for a very specific reason, for kind of a very important start in our relationship. But then we can watch it again and have a whole new like, oh, why is this movie so important again in
Yeah.
an entirely different way, being parents and kind of viewing the movie as like that parent, older adult perspective.
Yeah, and I think
yeah.
that's a lot of movies. Just watching them again as you get older and just you have whole new life experiences now and it changes your perspective.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think the best kinds of movies, they feel like they grow up with you in a way, and they start taking a different mold, you know. And I think
Yeah.
again, like I said earlier, that's kind of the point of this whole podcast, is to kind of explore that aspect of movies in general, like how not only they changed us, but how they changed for us, you know.
Yeah.
Thank you, Daniel and Samantha, so much for hopping on this podcast. Yes. Like the faun once says, I too have no más preguntas for you. But no, we're huge fans of your channels. Before we go, though, is there anything you'd like to promote? Obviously, check out TBR Schmitt if you don't know the reaction channel. Most of us, the listeners, probably already know about it, but just pointing that out there. Is there anything else that you guys would like to put out there?
No, I mean, we just thank you so much for inviting us. Like, we had such a good time with this. It was so nice to get to revisit this movie,
Oh, thanks.
and just connect with you guys. We got to have a long chat, you know, a couple of weeks ago before this. So it's just really nice to connect with you guys.
Likewise,
Check out our
likewise.
channel.
Yeah, check out their channel.
Okay, I'm gonna throw a question to you, and maybe this is like a curveball, but if there's like a reaction for people listening or watching this that don't know about your channel, maybe this is their first exposure to you, what's a movie reaction that you'd want to throw their way?
Okay, I'm gonna do two.
Okay.
So I really loved LA Confidential. I loved our reaction to LA Confidential. And just for my own sick amusement, I really enjoyed watching Arachnophobia with Daniel.
That's awesome.
I will say, while you're thinking there, I will say too, if you need something long, our Sopranos journey
Oh my god,
is like one of my favorite.
That's true.
That was the favorite part of my week, watching those. So
Hell
Yeah, that was a huge part of our channel. Shoot, I want to say, honestly, maybe like Terminator 2.
Okay.
yeah.
I've watched.
Because-
I've seen that reaction. I
Oh,
love
really?
that,
I haven't
yeah.
seen it yet.
I
I'll watch
love
it. Yeah.
It's early days.
Because
of the channel.
that was very early days, but that was also like such a big twist, I guess, that like, thank God after like all of these years, you never knew like what was happening.
First one threw me off.
Well, to the point where like I forget Terminator 2 that was a twist. Like it's so
Right.
like in like a culture that I forget, like, oh yeah, Arnold like giving his hand to the kid and be like, come with me if you want to live, is such
Yeah.
like that is such a turning point.
Yeah.
Okay, great recommendation. I'm excited for people to check out your channel.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much for joining us. Thank you so much to our patrons for supporting us. And last but not least, stay nice, dudes.